Right, hello guys, Luton here, welcome back for another video. So back in the day, I used to do a series called Round Breakdowns. It's pretty straightforward. I break down a round of Battlefield, discuss what's happening in the game, discuss the map, discuss some of the gameplay, what's been going on. One of the key things is generally that it was fairly unedited. It would usually be an entire round and I would just go through and break it down. Now going forward into the future, I guess I could kind of pick out selected highlights, but that was for another series as well I used to call Thought for the Day. The whole point of a round breakdown was that we would go through the entire thing and you guys get to see it. You know, it's kind of like the long format that I do with a lot of my videos because people like to sit and watch through the entire thing. Long videos not for everybody, but it was for me. So this is from the event that we did recently. This was the Game Changer event in Stockholm that we went to. EA had us go out there, play the game, record the game so that we could show you some of this stuff early at release. So this is Grand Operations and we start on the map Twisted Steel. So like with most Grand Operations, you're airdropping in here. So off we go to start the round, coming down into the map, paradropping in. Now this is a particularly troublesome starting area, as many of these are. But one of the really core things to point out with the game is to remember about smoke, because smoke is very, very powerful in the game now. You can't spot through the smoke, and you also can't obviously have any optic which sees through the smoke. So whilst you can shoot through, obviously, you won't be able to actually see people. So it's a really useful thing in terms of approaching the area or approaching an objective. And not enough people use smoke because obviously usually people want to go offensive all the time. They want to have offensive things constantly. But smoke is a really good option to take. It's very worthwhile considering that. And medics obviously have that option. So as you approach the first few objectives on this map, it's a really tricky one because you have these very large ditches, rises and falls. There is quite a lot of cover in terms of trees and so on, but it's a very problematic one, as you'll see going forward into some of these basically artillery positions that you've got to destroy. It's one of those maps, and here's the thing, you know, usually whenever you're doing an initial first starting point with Battlefield, it never really changes. It can be either, here we see some smoke going in, like, it can either be just kind of a steamroll, or it can be a nightmare where you just can't get out of your spawn, or it can be a kind of battle of attrition backwards and forwards. But one of the core things always is to remember to use your momentum. Use your momentum to get in there, but also at the same time stay at a reasonable pace. You know, you don't need to go charging in full hell all the way in every single time, because sometimes you're just putting yourself, here's, see again, loads of smoke, it's very useful. You don't need to put yourself at undue risk, which is why in these initial pushes I'm trying to be a little bit more cautious. I don't want to just go kamikazing in. Those of you guys that know me will know that, you know, I am one of the first people to just go charging in head on, screw my KD, I don't care, get on that objective. But that doesn't mean you need to do that every single time. You know, you need to be careful, you need to pace yourself. What I'm trying to do here is just eye any snipers. Even if you can't kill a sniper, if you can put a bit of pressure onto them, just put a few rounds like that onto them there, it suddenly makes them, you know, particularly scared. They try to sit back a little, because snipers tend to be very, very, very triggery about their KD. You know, they want to get that KD, of course, that's why they're playing a sniper. So if you can even just get a couple of rounds on them, it makes them think twice about sort of being quite so brazen to engage you. And that's why it's worthwhile trying to just maybe spot them, just get some rounds their way, suppress them a little bit before you start trying to move in towards an objective. Now I was trying to get some smoke here, but as you can see, despite my caution, the guys are just straight onto it. This is the real difficulty in approaching this position. The guys are entrenched, they've got very strong defensive positions there with fortifications. So, you know, if you're sitting up there with an LMG and you just see some guy poking his head over the top, you can just take him straight away. And they are, like, see, we're just not really making any forward progress, because once they know you're there, they're just going to push units onto that. And it's the same for us when we were defending, exact same thing, you know, it plays the same way both times. So I'm switching up here to an LMG support class, because there's so many units, enemy units around here, that what I was thinking here was to try and lay down some suppression, lay down some suppressing fire to try and get other people in, because again, in this game and in, you know, many games, whether it's postscriptum or something else, suppressing fire can be really, really useful. When there's a lot of rounds coming in your way, it's not about necessarily literally suppressing the target, but just when there's rounds coming in your way, it can be really, really useful. Obviously trying to supply friendlies here at the same time. Now you can see these little concrete tunnels here going through to access different points on the map. This can be really, really dangerous, obviously, because once you're in that little tunnel, you can get caught off, picked off very, very easy if there's a guy at the other end, so you want to be extremely cautious with that. But you can see we've managed to flank around here. We've managed to actually get around some of these units past the A point. And this is a really beneficial thing to do. Obviously, we can start laying in fire like I'm doing here. The downside to that is, as a support, you're going to be laying loads of tracers. And that is a homing beacon for snipers. So that's always the counter with that one. But getting around the first point is a really, really beneficial thing to do. Whenever you're on these starting points in a battlefield game, whether it's Conquest Assault, whether it's Conquest even itself, if you get stuck anytime, if you get pushed back, one of the most important things you can do is flank around, and it obviously works very well in Grand Operations as well. Get past them. Don't try to hit them head on, because as a defender you usually have a huge amount of benefit. You have a hugely strong position, and when you get some enemy around behind you, suddenly that strength is going to be broken. It's going to be fragmented, because defending units, then they don't know where to look. Do they look to their side? Do they look behind them? How many units are behind them? You know, it makes them kind of reassess what's going on. It throws them into disarray, and that gives you guys an advantage to then push in on that initial point of A or C or whatever. So you can see the guys here doing a really good job pushing in. We've already got A by the looks of things, and we're pushing around now because I'm assuming we put some extra pressure on the rear there. This first round for me wasn't a particularly strong one in terms of actually throwing myself onto the objective, but again, it's because I'm playing support. Now, a lot of you guys will know that whenever I'm playing, like I said, you know, I'm happy to kind of throw myself in there, run through the smoke, jump in onto an objective, be the last person in, just throw it in there. But you don't always have to play that way, and I don't want to play the same way every single time that I play. So in this round I was going support. I'm just sitting back a little bit. I'm just trying to support my guys. You know, I'm just letting everybody else do their job. Now, if I was with my own squad, again, you see, you can designate your role, you can speak to your guys, you can say, all right, I'm going to do this round, you guys are going to do this. You can make sure that your squad actually know what they're doing. You can make sure that they've, you know, set up the squad to distribute properly so that everyone is doing a certain role. Or you can just choose, like, say, okay, well, this round we're going to focus on getting the kills, and we'll let the other people pick up the pieces around that. We'll just put a lot of pressure onto the enemy. Or you can go all in, go hardcore, go straight in onto the objective. And you can see my guys here are balling in onto the objective here, so we're trying to just follow them in, support with ammo, etc, etc. So you support just throwing ammo constantly. One thing that I will say as well when it comes to playing support and throwing ammo, obviously, when you're on the attack, you're fairly often continually on the move, and players are moving around all of the time. So if you were to, say, drop an ammo box, okay, remember in Battlefield 5, you have to physically interact with that ammo box and pick up the ammunition. So it's not just like a passive thing where it was in previous games where people would just be around an ammo box and they would auto resupply. In this, you have to manually resupply. So what I've found is that it's generally much better to be as support when you're on an attack with, say, Grand Operations, Conquest Assault, something like this, to be throwing ammo to people, because they're on the move all the time and they might be in situations where they've got to dodge or jump or move out of the way. So putting down static boxes only is really a good thing to do when it comes to defense, not necessarily so much for attack. Okay, day 2. So we only took some pretty minor losses from that overall attack. The team did extremely well. I have to say my role in that first part was pretty minimal. We just kind of laid some suppressing fire and pushed through the kind of A and B points, just harassing. Didn't really throw ourselves onto the objective in a really heavy way. So on this next one, we're still on the Twisted Steel map, but this time we actually push in through the bridge, and we basically have to get to some kind of farm buildings. You'll see that as we go along. One of the good things which has happened for Battlefield in the past few years is actually the waiting for players to join element here. It can be a bit tedious because when you're in, you want to get in on the ground and get started, but it was always a problem with the game that, you know, people with a faster SSD or whatever would get into the round, be straightforward, and sometimes planting objectives before the defenders had even had a chance to really spawn in, get themselves set up. That was an issue which plagued previous Battlefield games for a long time, and it was pretty irritating because, you know, what's the point of playing if the mechanics of, you know, just joining in and getting through there are going to screw you over. So it can be a bit frustrating sitting around and waiting here to get started, but at least when you do start, everybody is on an equal footing, and therefore you should get better gameplay, you should get a better sense of what's happening, and as defenders you don't feel like you're just getting screwed over right from the word go. Now, one thing which might be a little bit confusing right here is obviously we're just capturing these points, and you think, well, hang on a minute, didn't we just do that? No, last time around what we were doing is we were doing demolition. We were blowing up the AA guns or the artillery guns on those positions. We had 4 to destroy. This time around we're capturing the territory. So we're capturing these points and then we're going to push continually further forward past the bridge, as you'll see. And it's quite epic when the planes come in crashing and stuff like this. One thing I will say, this game is very, very immersive. I got a real good vibe with this game. And for, you know, the same as with like Narvik when we played in the beta, one of the really great things is just having, you know, less UI, having less spotting on the map, because you just don't see all these Doritos all over the place constantly. And as I said before here, look at all this smoke. Dropping all this smoke in is really excellent in terms of the team progressing forward, not getting ruined by snipers. So if you're trying to get up on an exposed and open position like this, dropping some smoke grenades as a medic, for example, is a really good thing to do. And you can see this time around I was pretty cautious. Last time I was sitting back a little bit, but this time, because we're just doing these kind of sector captures, throw yourself in on this a little bit more, you know, get in there, really sort of lay down the fire, push through, don't let them kind of get in onto this point. Trying to be a lot more aggressive. I've taken some cover here behind these boxes as well, because obviously we're going to be taking fire up from the bridge. You can see those tracers coming in from up on the bridge, so just taking cover behind these boxes here to make sure this is taken. And again, then we're going to push across through to B, dropping ammo for people as we go. A little bit careful as we go out here, because again, you know, moving out from a point, getting in onto a point and moving out from a point, equally dangerous, especially when you've got so many enemy looking at you from, like, for example, look up here, see all these rounds coming in from this guy. Okay, I'll skip us forward a little way. So skipping very, very little forward, we actually come up onto the main road right here. Now again, obviously when you're up here, very, very exposed, potentially snipers, there's obviously planes coming in, bombing the top of the road here, they know that there's units around here. But we need to push across to the B attack point, the silo right there, and you've got the enemy units that are pushing up from there to try and control us, take control back of the road right here, which they're not going to be able to do. But you can see, look, see there's units all around here, enemy units all around here, they're behind us. So at this point, it's a lot more chaotic. There's disarray from the enemy, but so are we. We're all over the place. Our units are pretty fragmented from that first push, so even though guys are moving towards that point, we're still having to contend with the units behind us. So I didn't want to just throw myself straight in onto the objective there. What I want to try and do is clear off some of these guys here that are trying to cross the road or take control of the road, so that it gives us a little bit more control before we actually push in onto that point there. But you can see, like I say, snipers, riflemen down here on the road. This is exactly why we need to try and deal with this, because otherwise every person which comes up onto this road is going to be having to deal with these guys that are shooting us from behind. So then, just as I was deploying there, the guys have captured the silo point, so now we move on to connect the next sectors to capture. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is, of course, the running. There's a lot of running in Battlefield 5, but not dissimilarly to, say, Battlefield 1, to be quite honest with you, or even Battlefield 4 if you really think back to it and some of the maps that you have there. I'm interested to see how they do with transport post-release on certain maps and see whether it improves or whether they have, you know, a difference there in terms of being able to secure vehicles, because I felt when playing that there wasn't maybe, you know, so much accessibility in terms of transport vehicles where there really needed to be, so we'll be curious to see how that goes. Okay, there's a time delay, of course, as per usual, to allow the defenders to dig in a little bit. A is the point up on the bridge, and then B, you've got the further points like a kind of farm building or something further across the way there. Now, the defenders made a big mistake here. One of the big mistakes that people make often when defending is to sit back on the defense point. So what they did was they sat back on the defense point, they didn't push up onto the defense, they didn't get in better positions that were more forward from the point. Because as a defender, whilst you don't want to, I always say there's like a kind of golden circle. This is probably something I'll talk about in future videos. I always say there's like a golden circle for defenders, which is not too far from the objective, but not too close to it or too far behind it. You need to have a certain area, and you can see that the defenders right now, they're basically right on the point, or they're right behind the point. That's a bad thing, because basically you can see exactly what happens. Because they're so close onto the point, we can charge right up onto it and then just throw ourselves onto it with, you know, no clemency, just maximum firepower going in there. They also had actually really few defenders up here. They really hadn't bothered to kind of get up onto this point, and so that's why it's been basically steamrolled immediately. But as a defender, what you don't want to do is sit too far back, because like I say, you only want 2 or 3 guys to get into a position where they're prone and they're actually in a capture point sector, and they'll just take it off of you. You know, it doesn't matter if you're further back and you thought you had a good line of sight. If they can get behind a wreck, if they can get behind some sandbags, that's, you know, it's too late. And then once you've taken it, you're not going to have any time or opportunity to get back onto that point. As a defender, the best thing to do is to have some of your guys right on the point and some of your guys in front of it. You might want to have one or two behind just in the off chance of, you know, to protect from flanking, but primarily really what you want to do is push a little bit past your point. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you a defensive buffer. So basically the guys that are in front of your defense point are going to stop and maybe suppress and restrain and slow down the attackers coming in. But if you don't have anybody forward laying down fire, then the enemy are just going to run right up onto that point and essentially contest that point with you at the same time in the same space. You really don't want that to happen because, yeah, you might be able to throw them out of there, but if you don't clear them out of the point, then they're going to be on the point, and then you've got to simultaneously clear them from the point but also take it back quickly enough that they don't just steal it from you. So it's really beneficial to not sit right on a capture point. Now obviously it's a bit circumstantial. If you were, say, on your own or there's only two of you, you might want to consider just finding a really good piece of cover or trying to slow the bleed of that point, or, you know, try and keep it in contention until you can have some reinforcements come in. So it's one of those things that you do need to play by ear a little bit and look at the situation in on the ground. But generally, if there's a good amount of you, like a squad or two on a point, don't all just sit on the point. That's an automatic way to basically, you know, make yourself fail. It's just not going to happen. And you can see here, like, peeking over these sandbags, not a safe thing to do. Just immediately got my head taken off. Obviously we're playing with a lot of producers, YouTubers, like very Battlefield heavy gamers in this one, so a lot of people are really on point. You got to be, whenever I say, I should put this in at the start of videos as well, whenever you're playing these kind of games at events, there's always a bit of event syndrome, I say, where it's kind of like the gameplay tends to be a bit more full on, it tends to be a little bit more focused. It doesn't always give you a true impression of what the game is actually going to be like. Although I have to say, from the gameplay, from the day itself, I thought the skill level overall between teams was pretty well balanced in terms of having a good range of skills. There was obviously really top-end players who play Battlefield constantly, like Jack Frags, people like this. There's people like myself, which I consider kind of like a medium player, like, I'm alright, doing my own, holding my own, doing okay. And then there's some people who maybe just, you know, it's not really their thing, or they don't play the game constantly. So there was a good range of players, which I thought helped the overall feel for it, because again, in events that I've been to in the past, it can be really try hard and full on constantly. And whilst that can be exciting and really cool, you know, as per perhaps some of my games that we played in the past on my actual Battlefield server, you guys remember that those games were unrelenting and unrepentant. You know, it was just non-stop, full-on, try-hard, constantly. And those games can be really exciting, but they don't represent what Battlefield is actually like most of the time. So I actually thought the gameplay that we got from this event was not quite a public game, but it was definitely more representative than some events that I've been to, which is not a bad thing, because actually that can be pretty irritating for me going to an event and you come away with not really a true impression of what it's going to be like, and then when you get to the game itself and it's public, you're like, this doesn't play anything like what I thought it was going to play like. So I was actually quite happy for that, and this is a good thing. It's why it's a good thing to have so many people come to an event, because then you do get a kind of truer demographic, a truer cross-section of the community when you've got more people there, and then it just kind of plays out better in all respects, you know. Okay, so we kind of barreled on through here. You can see we're in onto B, which is the creek, and we're just kind of taking this away. But there's still quite a heavy amount of fire. Now, what the key to this is momentum. You know, it's something I've talked about in Battlefield many times, and it's something I will continue to talk about. Momentum. Remember my core tenets of Battlefield: objective, momentum, and flexibility. That's what it's all about. First up, think about your objective. Which one are you going to go for? What do you want to do? Second, momentum. Have you got momentum to push on through to the next point? Sadly, I don't have anything to deal. Oh, actually, I do. I've got the little anti-tank pistol. Obviously not enough, but it does a tiny little bit of damage right there. Objective, momentum, flexibility. Objective, which one are you going to go for? How are you going to tackle it? Which direction are you going to? Momentum, have you got enough momentum to actually carry your team forward and take the point? Westy, thank you for the revive, my friend. So have you got enough momentum to actually get onto the point? And that is one of the most critical things, because if your team has momentum, you can just go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And what you're talking about there is not allowing the defenders or the attackers enough of a chance to actually carry through, you know, to get in and defend, dig in, or, as I say, keep their own attacking force pushing forward. You want to break that momentum, you want to break that kind of speed of movement of the enemy, because that's the thing which will carry them forward, and that's what you as an attacker want. You want to be able to kind of just keep moving from one to the next, so they never have an opportunity to really take stock of what's going on. They don't want to have an opportunity to think about what they're doing because you're just hitting them constantly, and you don't give them any chance to kind of let up really. And then the third thing I always say is flexibility. Flexibility means being willing to maybe change your class, change your weapon, change your route, your direction, your flank. You know, look at what is actually happening on the ground. If it's not working, don't just keep pushing it. You know, if a square peg isn't going through that round hole, then just keep continually hitting it isn't going to make it go through. So for example, if you are on a medium range engagement and you're constantly getting taken out, change up to a weapon which is going to enable you to handle that better. If you're going on a flanking route constantly and you can just never get there, try something else, because, you know, whilst it can always seem a good idea to flank and try and get around, if it's not working for you, maybe you can actually be more beneficial by sticking with your primary force and just contributing more heavy firepower in a concentrated point. Similarly, the reverse is true. You know, if you're constantly as a big force trying to push through, one or two people can be really beneficial in terms of doing a flank. Is armor really problematic for you? If it is, make sure that you primarily neutralize that before your team even attempt to go and do something else. There are many ways in which this can apply, and basically all you're really talking about is what is being a problem for you and then countering whatever that thing is. Now you can see we're still on the creek here, we're still on the B point, and we're still trying to take it, but we're not actually capping. However, we are staying back here, we're still basically holding this position. We're not pushing in onto the base, onto the actual farm or whatever itself, because we know we've got a pretty strong position here. Look, I can cover the right hand side very easily, the guys are on the roof there, and we've got another guy on the left hand side. This is a strong position for us, and it's not going to really assist us to go through and clear that out. What we're waiting for here is reinforcements from friendlies to come in and actually help us clear through this point. Now we could push forward and try to clear these guys out, but we're just going to put ourselves at a high risk there, and by keeping our squad together and keeping us all in one spot and all up, it's basically very strong, beneficial for us to do this, because then we only need like one or two other people to come in and we might start taking that point, and then that puts the pressure back on the enemy. And you can see we managed to successfully take that there when the enemy basically got pissed off that they weren't able to find us either, and they pushed back towards us, and we successfully take that sector now. So just saving us a little bit of time, we now push up towards the final 3 objectives for this sector. Now it's quite nice that you end with 3 objectives and not just the 2 as we had done so far, because it makes it a little bit more challenging, I guess, for the defenders and the attackers, depending on how those teams are playing. Now obviously you could attack this from say 2 points at once. It really depends on how the defenders are playing. You know, you've got to kind of read the lie of the land as the attackers, but you could come at it from like A and C together. It would be unwise to go for the B point, I guess, before anything else, because you're just going to put yourself in a position where you're sandwiched by the enemy team. But a good thing to do as an attacking team as well is, if you're in a big force together, you can push through and use that strength to basically punch a hole through each objective. So you can see most of our guys are here onto C, then we're going to push across straight through to B. I think actually many of our guys have also hit B simultaneously, so we took C and B together, which is obviously a strong thing to do as well if you're able to do that. But yeah, as I say, coming in onto C, actually the defenders are taking this back quite quickly, look. So you come in on C, push straight through to B, straight through to A, just go down the line, knocking them off, and then hopefully they won't be able to actually dig in or gain any kind of momentum back against you. But you can see they managed to take that B point back quite quickly as soon as they threw themselves onto it and put some bodies in on there. But I get pretty wrecked coming up here. You can see just the sheer amount of firepower. I wanted to actually try and get up and res my guys right here, but there's just no way I can get up here. There's fire coming from my left hand side there, look on the corner of the bridge, and also from the bunker point there in the middle. Now when we get rezzed up, we're going to push through onto A. Again, not much to really tell here. We had the momentum with us, so it's just a case of pushing down. You can see bombing runs coming in from planes there as well. A lot of firepower, a lot of AT coming back from the defenders. But this is a good position for an LMG. You know, I actually didn't have too many targets up for me right here, but it's a good position if you were sitting there with like an MG 32, 34, whatever. You can just kind of lay down the fire, lay down the fire, lay down the fire. Obviously a pretty good conclusion for us in this round as well. We had the strength with us and we had the momentum with us all the way through. As a defender, that's the most important thing to break, and it can be very difficult to break it once the attacking team have it. That sort of momentum and speed and weight of enemy that are just kind of pushing down constantly, and it's really difficult to break that. I would say one of the best things to do sometimes when it comes to enemy momentum, if you're in a kind of capture control point situation like that, instead of trying to deal with it head on, because if they're just hitting you and hitting you, it can be really difficult to break that. One point to say, by the way, the end of this gameplay, I didn't actually have a scoreboard, and the scoreboards were kind of getting messed up for us in the gameplay, so I'm going to use that one right there as the final scoreboard. I love the start of this map because you're just kind of getting set on, I don't love it, it's dumb, like you're getting set on fire as you're moving through, so I guess go around that or be quite careful about it. You see at the start here, look, we're throwing tons and tons of smoke down to cover our advance from snipers or machine guns. Luckily for us, I think the enemy team's morale was pretty broken at this point because they really didn't contest this forward point. So I cut this last section together a little bit because, like I say, there's not so much happening in this round. But yeah, talking again about breaking momentum, one of the best things you can do is instead of trying to deal with a very strong enemy head on, kind of let them pass and try to steal a base from behind them, because then that's going to break them apart. But it really just depends on your team composition. Sometimes you know how it goes, you're just not going to be able to do anything, and that's just how it is. Really need to improve my... Oh, actually, this guy goes around the corner, I think, and then... Yeah, see, like, I look back over here expecting him not to come back to me, because I think, he's gone somewhere else there. Really need to improve my reaction time on that one. Okay, so like I say, not too much happens on this one through the A sector. We're just here in the town. I'm just including it so you can kind of see what the town is and looks like. And then we're pushing up towards the B and C points. Actually, they've taken A back off of us there. I actually don't think when I was in-game I noticed this, actually. Because I think I was so caught up in the kind of tunnel vision of pushing forward. I don't think I even noticed that that one had... Many of our guys were just pushing up, pushing up. I don't think I even noticed because we took that first point quite strong. And then they did actually take it back off of us. I didn't see that. Okay, anyway, so pushing up towards B here. Now we get through some of these fields and we're just kind of crossing. We end up in quite a few little running battles with the enemy right here. Got screwed over, so GG. Thank you so much for that. Luckily, again, with the ability to pick up your teammates, this is really nice. It does definitely alter the flow of the game in a really, really big way. So Flare coming in here to give me a revive. It takes a bit longer if you're not a medic, but basically anyone in your squad can pick you up. We know this from obviously in the beta. If you're medic, it's a bit quicker, but I really like the mechanic. It really saves you in so many situations when you've got attrition, and it just kind of really alters the flow of the game in a way that we haven't seen before, and I personally really like it. I think this is one of the points of contention that people who don't want to have to play in a squad dislike, but you know, at the end of the day, it is what it is. You know, if you're in a squad, you get some perks, you get some benefits for working together. The devs, the DICE, they really want the DICE. The DICE really want people to work together, and they're trying to encourage that through giving you benefits and perks as a squad, and one of those is being able to pick up your squad mates. So I guess if you want to have that, be in a squad, you know, but if you don't want that, well, you don't have to have it. You can still run solo and it will be just the same as it always was. You just don't have that extra benefit of having people be able to pick you up. Now on this map for Arras, it can be pretty problematic crossing some of these fields. You can see we're just getting caught out in the open constantly, so we were dealing with all this chaos. The rest of our guys were pushing up on the point to actually take the objective, so this wasn't perhaps in some ways one of my more objective rounds to play, but I was really trying to just play the role of suppression and stick with my squad as well, just go with them, try and give them some support, so it was a fun round to play. One of the interesting things about this round for Grand Operations, doing Twisted Steel, and then this map, which is Arras, it played a lot better than Narvik, because obviously Narvik was the Grand Operation map that you play on the beta, and this one to me was much more enjoyable. It felt a lot more kind of like testy between the two teams. I think the maps worked really well for it. It might be just, of course, that it's a new thing. That's always something you have. It's a new thing, new shiny thing, and you're like, oh, this is really cool. You play it for a while and it gets pretty irritating. But for me, I just felt straight from the word go that it played a lot better. Enjoyed it. Tell me what you think as always, guys, down below. Back with some more content very soon.